I've made over 1,000 tracks in the last few years, and through all that I've learned a few things that's completely changed how I produce music. This is exactly what I teach inside my academy, and today I'm going to break down the biggest lessons for you. Let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is taking too long on your tracks. I used to spend weeks on just one track, so I'd have one track on the go and that's it. I wouldn't be producing anything else. And more often or not, the idea would already be down and I'd literally just be tweaking and replacing things and reworking things and actually not getting anywhere. More often than not, I'd save a new version, change something, save a new version after that, change something else, and before you know it, you're on version like 25 and the track's not really improved. Sometimes it even gets worse. So after doing this a few times and getting to version 1 million, I realized that this was just not a great way to produce. And now I rarely get to version 3, 4 or 5. By the time it's hit that, I know it's time to finish the track and move on. So if you've got projects right now where you're on version 20 plus, then hear me out, finish that track, move on to the next one, because you're killing your creativity. Try and finish a track as quick as possible and then move on, produce a new track and learn as much as you can every time you produce. And when you hit that wall, you know it's time to move on. If you've experienced this, you'll know what I mean. So really take this into account. The best skill I've built is knowing when a job's done. Because music is so subjective, it can sometimes feel impossible to get a track sounding perfect. So knowing when to move on is key. Now the next lesson I want to teach you is actually super controversial. And it's all about not being original. So you don't want to be original in your music yet. So what I mean by this is I used to think copying other artists was cheating and that all my music needs to be original. Otherwise, I'm never going to make it. But the problem with that is I was making these original tracks, but they absolutely sucked. They weren't finished to a professional level. They didn't sound good. So the creativity was there, but the execution wasn't. So to change this, I started using reference tracks. So I started downloading tracks from my favorite artists, all the big artists that get millions of views, and I put their tracks in my DAW and started copying them. Copied the drums, copied the bass, copied like the melodies, got similar vocals in, effects, and then my tracks suddenly started improving like crazy. And then my execution in making tracks started to improve, and then gradually I was able to use reference tracks less and less and just let the creativity come out because I knew I could create bangers. I still do use reference tracks though from time to time because it is still really helpful. So that just goes to show how powerful using them is. Now, if you want extra help with this, I actually have a free project template for FL Studio and Ableton. So you can go ahead and download that, and it's got all the different instruments and where to put them so you can make tracks really efficiently. And it's also got a reference track slot at the top. So you pop your reference track in there, and then below it, you've got all the different slots to put your drums, your basses, your vocals, your instruments, and your effects. So get that downloaded now and use it on your next track. It will be absolutely game changing for you. And this leads nicely into my next lesson, which is all about being organized. So before I started using this project template, and if you watch my videos, you know I use it literally in every single track now, my projects were an absolute mess, just completely chaotic. Stuff was everywhere and it made the track a mess. I would have a kick drum at the top and then I'd have like my snare at the bottom, and it just really hurt my brain basically and made the structure of my tracks a mess. So once I'd organized my tracks and I'd also sorted out my sample library, my preset libraries, my creativity went up and my stress levels whenever I looked at my project went down. So what I want you to do is use this project template, organize your samples as well, organize your like serum presets, and then produce a track with this all organized and see how much better you get on. And in my academy, I actually teach the best way to get organized that I've been using for the last few years, and it's literally the fastest way to make music. Using this method, I can actually finish some tracks in less than 4 hours if I'm fast enough, if everything comes together. Now for the next lesson, I see students fall into this trap all the time, and it's that you don't need more plugins, or even worse, more hardware. People often think the next big plugin or the next big update on the digital audio workstation will revolutionize their music and make their music suddenly sound good. People spend thousands of pounds on this kind of stuff and their music still sounds average. And that's because learning about all this stuff isn't going to change your music. Learning how to make good music is. So what I've done is I've completely simplified the plugins I use. So I've just got a select few and I stick with them. For example, Serum 2 for synths, Nexus 4 for instruments, the stock plugins, a few free plugins, and then a few FabFilter plugins as well, and Kickstart 2 for my sidechain. So what I want you to do is take a look. How many plugins do you have? How many are you using? Do some of them just do the same things? Can you strip back and just use a few and your tracks will still sound the same? The answer is yes. So do it. What you need to understand is the pros make more with less. Skill beats gear every single time. The next lesson I really want to talk about is sound selection. So if you've ever heard this 80-20 rule, sound selection is really like 80% of music production. Have you ever added a sample in? You've then compressed it, EQ'd it, added saturation, distorted it, you name it, and it still doesn't sound great. That's because no matter how many effects you put on a sample, if the original sample is trash, the overall sample is just going to be trash. So that's why you really need to focus on picking the best sounds. So I realized when I put in a sample that works, you can often get away with just changing the level of it and that's it. You don't need any extra plugins on top of it. For example, if you put a kick drum in and it's already perfectly processed for your track, you don't need to put any extra effects on top of it. You can literally just adjust the level so it's right in your mix and that's it. So if you were to look at a lot of my productions now, there's not actually that much post-processing on it. It's just nicely mixed down and it's got the perfect sample for the track. And this is also where key comes into play. So let's say your track is in F minor. You need to make sure you know the key of every sample you're putting in and it's in F minor. Otherwise, it's just going to be a disaster if you can't figure out what key it's in and you just wing it and put it in and then suddenly it's out of key. Now this only applies for tonal sounds such as melodies, vocals, 808s, things like that, and not for more transient sounds like hi-hats and claps. So what I want you to do when you next produce is every time you add a sample, think, is this improving my track? Does this work in my track? If yes, then keep it. If no, take it out, try something else, and keep repeating that process. And just by doing that, you should end up with a track that sounds way better than if you didn't focus on that. Now, the next lesson is quite interesting, and it's all about mixing down your track. So if you're quite new to producing, you might find mixing quite hard, and you might spend a lot of time mixing down, which can actually kill your creativity. But as you produce more and more, you'll get a better understanding of how to mix, and you can actually mix as you go without it killing your creativity vibe. So if this is something you struggle with to mix and produce at the same time, why not just do the producing first for the first creativity part, then mix after? And then the more experienced you get, hopefully you'll be able to combine them together so that you can mix as you go and you can still stay in that flow state. So this is a bit more of an individual lesson. You need to think about how this will work for you and then apply it. What I did when I first started producing is I literally just focused on getting all the samples down, getting the ideas down, and then I'd come back and do the mix down afterwards. But what I do today, 10 years later, is I'll literally mix down as I produce because I'm so quick at it now. I can literally just drag in a sample, tweak it and it's done, and then move on to the next one. And that just helps me way more. And then the last lesson I really want to go through is getting feedback on your tracks and knowing when to move on. So one big problem a lot of people have is never finishing tracks, or in my case, finishing tracks that didn't sound very good. And one way to help you figure out what's worth finishing, what's not worth finishing, is to get feedback on that track. Now in my academy, not only do you get all the lessons, but you get one-to-one feedback from me. So what students will do is they'll go through all the material, make a track, send it to me for feedback, and then I can advise them on how to improve it. And then they'll learn and learn from that track until they've learned as much as possible and then move on to the next one. Now it can be scary sharing your track with other people, but it's honestly one of the best ways to improve. And you may get collabs from it in the future and be able to work with people, learn a lot through that as well, which is a massive bonus. I hope you've learned something from this video. Let me know in the comments what you're going to implement from this video to improve your tracks. And why not watch this video on the screen right now where I go through my 3-step process to creating bangers.